lesson, we're going to talk about nozzle sizes for pressure washers. It's important that a pressure washer has the right nozzle size, because the nozzle, the size of that hole, is what determines how much pressure that unit is going to put out based on a specific gallons per minute. So in the industry, we have a nozzle chart. This is an example of one. I don't know how well you can read it. If you can't read this, then check with your local distributor or with your service manager. Have them get you a nozzle chart and follow along. On the left-hand side, we have listed for us gallons per minute. Gallons per minute, and this particular chart starts off at 2 gallons a minute, increases in half a gallon increments all the way up to 10 gallons a minute. Then across the top, we have listed for us different pressure ratings. It starts off this one at 500 psi, goes up in 500 psi increments all the way up to 6,000 psi. Now in the body of this chart, we actually have listed for us the different nozzle sizes. Nozzle sizes numerically starting off at 1.5 being the smallest, goes all the way up to a 30, and they're available in half increment sizes. So if we are working on a pressure washer, we want to know what kind of nozzle or what size of nozzle that it takes. We simply find out exactly what the unit is designed to do based on the ID tag on the machine or on the pump. Let's say we're working on a unit that's 4 gallons a minute. We find 4 gallons a minute left-hand column. And if the unit is supposed to put out 3,000 psi, then we find the 3,000 psi at the top column, and we drop down and we see where the two lines intersect. 4 gallons a minute, we come over, drop down at 3,000 psi, and it says here that it should be a 4.5 size nozzle. Very important that it has a 4.5 size nozzle. It determines the size of the hole in the tip. Let's say, for example, that all we have is a 6, and if you put a number 6 nozzle in a machine that's pumping 4 gallons a minute, then you're going to end up getting, if you come over here right in between, you're going to end up getting somewhere around, it's actually less than 2,000 psi. So if you're expecting to see 3,000 psi on your gauge, with that size nozzle, a number 6 at 4 gallons a minute, you're going to find that there's no way in the world you're going to get the proper PSI, and you may start looking at other areas, perhaps the pump or the pulleys or water volume, and that's not even the case. The problem is the wrong tip size. Very, very important to have the right tip size. So it's important as a technician that you become very familiar with this nozzle chart, because this is a lot of times the starting point whenever we're determining the proper pressure on a machine. If our pressures are off, they may be off 300, 400, 500 psi, and it may be just something as simple as a nozzle, because they do wear out. So for example, let's say it calls for a 4, and maybe you're a little bit worn out. Maybe that 4 has worn out to a 4.5, and so then if you have a 4.5 tip and the unit's putting out 4 gallons a minute, you may be cleared down to 2,500 psi. So you can see how important that is, that the proper tips be used. One thing that you're going to find, though, as you talk to consumers and customers, is that they'll come in and they'll say, hey, I need a yellow tip. And so what I've done is I've shown you some different tips. They'll say, hey, I want a red tip, or hey, I want a yellow tip, or no, I want a green, no, I like the white tip. And they think that if they ask for a white tip, you're going to give them the right tip for the machine. What's important to remember is that the colors of the tip, all they do is they designate the spray pattern. This is a 0-degree nozzle, like a pencil jet. The yellows are always 15-degree, which is the most popular, but it's a fan spray. When you know it, doggone phone all the time. Then you got a green tip, which is a 25-degree, which is a little wider, obviously, than a 15, and then you got your widest at 40-degree. So you have to explain to the customer that it only indicates the spray pattern, doesn't indicate the size of the orifice. It's important to know the gallons per minute and the PSI of the machine so that you can get the right size. Because this 15-degree spray nozzle is available anywhere from a 1.5 size nozzle all the way up to a 30, obviously going to give you different pressures at different volumes, and so that's very important to realize. The customer can get a nozzle bubble pack. So if they have a machine that requires a number 4 tip, they can get all of these nozzles all together in one complete set, 0, 15, 25, and 40. So that's important to remember. So in conclusion, get your nozzle chart, be familiar with it, study it, spend some time with it. It's going to save you when you're out in the field.